Hello, welcome to the For the Fans podcast. It's episode number 12 time. Here on a Tuesday night, I'm Justin Melillo. Alongside, as always, it's Kevin McAdams. Kevin, I'm sorry we couldn't record last night. That was all my fault, but how you doing tonight?
Oh, you're good, man. I'm doing pretty good. Funny enough, we were talking about the truck race before we got on here. Ironic enough, both were eating some kind of brand of or style of Alfredo. I was eating fettuccine Alfredo before I got on here. Before we can start this whole podcast up, and I'm doing pretty good. I thought this weekend was pretty par for the course for where we were at in terms of Pocono and Iowa. Can't complain about Iowa. It was probably the best track on the course and or on the schedule for trucks and Xfinity, and then Pocono's Pocono. So that's all I can really say about that. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm a lot better than I was doing last night, so that is definitely something to look forward to for these next however long we're doing this recording. Uh, I'm I'm not as hungry as I thought I would be, and I've got a full plate of tortellini Alfredo sitting next to me, so I'll probably be heating that up after we're done here. And yes, it is quite ironic how we both had Alfredo tonight, and in the truck race, we will be talking about an incident involving Anthony Alfredo, or Fast Pasta as he likes to be called. So we'll get to that in just a second. I'm getting back, or I did get back from Pocono this weekend. It was my second race in a row that I went to, and I'm going to be going to Watkins Glen this weekend, so it's going to be 3 in a row, and I don't know how I'm going to survive. But anyway, I got back from Pocono at like 1 in the morning yesterday, and then as I was just telling you before we went live, I had quite possibly the worst migraine of my life, and it definitely took me out of commission for about 24 straight hours. It was not a fun time to be me, and I couldn't get anything done. I did get things done, but I didn't want to be getting things done. And when it came down to recording last night or holding off to tonight, I'm really glad that we did, because I don't know if we would have had a good product if we would have did it last night. And I'm definitely feeling 100% better now, and ready to talk some NASCAR racings with you. So let's jump right in and get to it. We're going to talk about 4 races tonight. 3 of them being the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, the Truck Series, and we're also going to talk about an iRacing event that happened. And all these events happened over 2 tracks. 2 happened at Pocono, 2 happened at Iowa. Very convenient. So we're going to talk about, first and foremost, the Truck Series race, which happened on Saturday afternoon at Pocono Raceway. And honestly, there's not much to talk about. Besides that, Ross Chastain, he went out there. He absolutely dominated the race. He played everything perfectly. He passed inspection. He had a lot of fun in his victory. And honestly, there wasn't much more to talk about in this one.
I just watched I actually didn't watch any of the truck race live. I was at work, and I honestly, just because I know how Pocono can be, I neglected it. I was not surprised to see someone dominating it. I was pleasantly surprised to see Ross did as well as he did. Good for him. I'm happy for him. But man, what a absolute dominant performance. The victory lane thing was pretty funny. The whole watermelon beach ball toss into the crowd. They throw it back to him, back and forth. He's got to be the most fun at this point. He's so grateful for his wins. Like the dude, just every single week, he seems more excited about the next win. So uh, I really look forward to him winning. And then I looked at the results And I watched a good bit of it just now before we came on, and Tyler Ankrum finished in second, and we were talking about it a little bit. It, it's pretty crazy to think that this kid pretty much was off the radar for a lot of mainstream and casual fans. Uh, I mean, we know some of these other young guys, Burton, Gilliland, and I mean, you got other people like Gregson and Nemechek and Briscoe and Xfinity that are young and up and coming. It's just crazy that this kid, out of seemingly nowhere, is putting on really high end performances for DGR Crosley. Uh, I mean, it's a Toyota truck by all means. It's still a high performance truck, but we're expecting someone like a KBM guy to be leading the Toyota field, and it's just not happening. So I mean, give kudos to him for finishing second. Otherwise, if Chastain just didn't have a piece so strong, and he's honestly just got the experience and the ability to dominate a race like that, I think Ankrum would have had something for him. But that's still a great performance for him. I know one thing that that just unfortunate. Stuart Friesen does wreck on turn one, lap one. Seemingly just an arrow wreck, loses the air on the side, and gets turned around, and Anthony Alfredo just becomes an innocent bystander and gets taken out.
Yeah. So it seemed like the truck race had a big issue with getting going. They had the very first turn of the very first lap with Stuart Friesen. They all fanned out, and Friesen went as low as he possibly could, and they go into the corner, and I guess Friesen was just a lot lower than he thought he would be or where he thought he needed to be, and there was no grip down there at that point, and he slid. And the left side of Alfredo's truck, I've got a picture here that our photographer for the weekend, Dante Ricky, had taken, and you could just see it just opened up like a can of sardines. It was completely destroyed on that side of the truck, and of course NASCAR's not going to let him go back out there, even though the rest of the truck is fine. But all the crush panels and all the safety stuff that's in the door, embedded in the door, just all over the track at that point. That was, like I said, lap one, turn one. They went back racing, and immediately the next green flag lap in turn one, the 28 truck gets spun or spins himself out. And then they get the restart again, and I guess they decided that they couldn't throw the yellow again, because if they did, they were afraid they weren't going to get going, which is understandable. But Bailey Curry ends up spinning before they even get to turn one, and he collects Johnny Sauter a little bit, and but there was no debris, and there was no immediate danger, and the trucks were able to get by. And NASCAR, I think they made the right call there, not throwing the caution flag, because like I said, if they would have thrown the caution flag there on that restart, which was on lap 9, and the stage being only 15 laps, we would have had the first stage of the race be completely under caution. And who knows if they would have even gotten, green at all during the race at that point, if that was the precedent that was being set. So, little trouble getting going, but once they had that call on the caution, it was pretty straightforward at that point. Ross Chastain started in second. He started alongside Austin Hill. And the restart was legal and everything, but Ross had, gotten the advantage. Hill had taken the low lane, which he was the very first start/restart of the entire weekend. So nobody really knew if it was going to be high lane dominant or low lane dominant. So Hill chooses the bottom. Ross chooses the outside, or he gets put to the outside at that point, and they go into turn one, and Ross is able to maneuver around and take the lead, and then the caution happens, and Ross takes the outside again on the restart, and then another caution happens, and Ross takes the outside again. And for the remainder of the night, every single restart is being led by Ross Chastain on the outside line, leading the field to the restart. He led 54 laps of 60. It was a dominating performance. The only 6 laps he didn't lead, he gave those up to Harrison Burton at the end of stage 2 with 3 laps to go. He played the game to win the race, and that was pit before the pit road closes. So Chastain, he gives up those 10 points, goes in, takes his service, comes back out. Of course, he stays on lead lap because Pocono is such a big track. Harrison Burton goes on. He leads his first laps of, I want to say, the season. He leads the 3 laps to end the stage, gets the playoff point, wins the stage, leads the next couple laps under caution before they open up the pits. He pits, a bunch of others pit. Chastain, of course, he already pitted. He's good to go to the end of the race. He stays out. He takes them to the restart. They go green the entire rest of the way. And the only person that had any chance at possibly getting to Chastain by the end of the race was Tyler Ankrum, who was catching up and closing in on him at one point. I think he got the difference down to under 2 seconds, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't, anything more.
Conservation mode by Ross.
Exactly. So, not much to talk about in this race, but like you said, I was so enamored by Chastain's victory. What he did to celebrate that win it's what the sport needs. It needs more of that. It needs more personality. It needs more of these guys getting so excited to win, because you get, and nothing against them because they're really talented drivers, but you get guys like Kyle Busch, you get guys like Kevin Harvick or Denny Hamlin now, or Brad Keselowski, and those guys, they go and they celebrate and they're happy and they won the race, but that's it. They go and they do their normal stuff, and then they move on and they're already on to next week. Ross goes out there, he wins the race, and he's got to go get a watermelon, and he gets his beach ball, and he goes into the stands and he's starting to play pass the beach ball with the fans in the stands, and he smashes the watermelon, and then he gets another watermelon for victory lane, but I don't think he smashed that one. And he's driving around and doing burnouts here and doing burnouts there, and it's just really refreshing to see someone so excited to win, because it gets stale after every once in a while. We'll talk about how Hamlin ended up in victory lane later at Pocono, but when Denny was able to win, he went out there, he did one of the lamest burnouts that I've ever seen. They do the front stretch interview, and then he just pulled in a victory lane, celebrated with his team, did the hat dance, and then went to the media center for his post-race availability and left, and that was it. And that was Denny Hamlin's way of celebrating, and nothing against him. If that's how he does it, that's how he does it. But I love how Ross gets so into it.
He's I think it's honestly the most unique and most charismatic victory celebration since Carl Edwards, simply just because it's something different. I mean, with Carl Edwards' backflip, it was not only impressive, but it was something completely different that no one else has done before. Now we got, and I mean, there's been guys that jump the fence, like Tony Stewart. He jumps the fence and does all this and that, jumps into the scorer's booth and all this and that, and jumps into the stands. Like, a lot of drivers have been doing that lately with the flag and stuff. Now we got Ross doing something completely unique with the whole watermelon, because he's the watermelon man from Florida, and it's cool. It's definitely, I think we've hit it home enough. It's definitely what the sport needs at this point, a personality that's so likable and at the same time so talented. I mean, we got a guy like a Kyle Busch, or even a Brad Keselowski, Kevin Harvick. They're all so talented, but they have a lot of people who do not like them, and there's valid reasons for not liking them. Whether or not you don't like them or not, it's one thing. But there are a lot of people that don't like the very talented guys in our sport. So
Hi,
it's just
hi Jarvis.
yeah. Jarvis is saying hi. He's probably gonna start yakking off. It's I want to see Ross in a high end cup ride, and I really hope it happens soon because I mean he's not old by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's 26, but he needs to be in a top ride because he's absolutely killing it in trucks. Anytime he was in Xfinity, he was outperforming a lot of the cars he wasn't supposed to with Davis cars. So it's just like he needs a top ride, and at this point, it's well overdue.
Yeah, I'm really, we've talked about it plenty of times already this year how, it really sucked that his deal with Ganassi in the Xfinity series kind of fell through because I said it, and I'm sure you echo my same sentiments. He would be a title contender in the Xfinity series with that ride, and we everybody got robbed. He got robbed of the opportunity. The fans got robbed of seeing him, competing in the second, biggest, part of the sport. Now he's relegated back to the truck series, and that wasn't even his first intention. Hell, I mean, he didn't even know what he was gonna do after that DC Solar thing happened. It was crazy how everything all came together, and where we're at now, where he was able to switch his points and work on getting into the truck playoff when he originally had been going for the Xfinity series, and it's crazy how it all worked out for him, and I'm glad to see it, and I'm really looking forward to watching him compete in the playoffs. Just a quick update on that. I did the math. Right now, as it stands, Ross has a 57-point lead over 20th place in the series standings. In order to clinch, he needs to have a 55-point lead over 20th, leaving Eldora. So as long as he doesn't lose more than 2 points over 20th place, who is currently Anthony Alfredo, he should be all right. But yeah, that's where it stands here. 5 guys have won this season. Moffitt twice, and then Austin Hill once, Johnny Sauter once. We talked about Tyler Ankrum. He won at Kentucky, and then technically Ross has won 3 times. I still think that he's got one more that was taken away from him at Iowa. But Ross will be in after his win at Pocono. He's just got to, not finish last in the next 2 races, and he'll be all right. And even if he does finish last in the next 2 races, I don't think he's getting passed by, either Natalie Decker or Anthony Alfredo. I think he'll be all right.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. And we got. I'll, speaking of Eldora is going to be insane. It always is. It's probably the most anticipated non-Cup Series race in the entire spectrum of NASCAR. So that's going to be wild. I know that there's some part-timers showing up. I know Briscoe is going to show up. Ironically enough, he's someone we're going to talk about here in a minute. There's a bunch of other truck slash dirt ringers that are going to be showing up. Hopefully, we get another Hall of Fame performance from Norm Benning. For some reason, just because they're going so slow, the slow trucks can do something. I mean, shoot, when they had Bobby Pierce and the Mittler Brothers 63, it was pretty quick. So we got some really good races coming up for trucks. Eldora's Thursday, if I'm right.
Yes.
So it's going to be awesome. It's always the most fun race of the truck season, just because of how they actually run heats for the qualifying and all this and that. So I'm excited for that. I'm glad Pocono's in the rearview mirror for trucks. It's one of the worst tracks on the schedule for them. It's just, it's not what I think it's just not what they think it was going to be. It's not as draft oriented as they thought, and it just gets really spread out, and it's just not as fun.
The high side tickler of Kyle Strickler will be in a KBM truck on Thursday night. I think he's got one of the best chances to win at Eldora. I also think that Stuart Friesen's going to be the guy to beat just because of his extensive dirt background and his knowledge of these trucks over the last couple seasons. Yeah, he had a pretty bad screw up at Pocono and put himself in jeopardy of possibly missing the playoffs altogether. But I think that he's going to rebound pretty well here at Eldora. And then a bunch of other people on the list that I've never even heard of them, but I have to assume that they're all well known in the dirt world, and that it should hopefully be a really good race. I mean, Eldora has not disappointed me once in its history, and I'm not expecting it to this year. I'll have to watch it at work because Thursday night I close, so I'll have it on my iPad and I'll watch what I can and hopefully they put on a really good show. And I think that's a good point to transition over to our next race of the weekend, which was won by last year's Eldora Dirt Derby champion, Mr. Chase Briscoe, who will be competing again this year in the same truck he did last year. But we move over to Iowa and in the cornfields, and we've got the U.S. Cellular 200, 250.
50, yeah.
And so looking at this race and looking at this racetrack, it's like Iowa always puts on a great show, and it definitely did put on a good show, but it was also dominated by one driver the entire time. Christopher Bell put on a clinic the entire day, and even at the end when it was Chase Briscoe on way fresher tires, I still thought Bell had a really good shot at holding him off and winning, but Briscoe definitely put his skill on point and was able to make the move around Bell in the closing laps. He only led 7 of them, and Chase Briscoe takes home his first victory of the season at Iowa. And like I said, I thought it was a pretty good race for what I saw. I watched it in the media center at Pocono with a couple of other reporters. I know Jordan Bianchi was there. He was sitting across from me watching. Bob Pockris, he was listening on his scanner on his computer, listening in and giving everybody updates on the computer. And a couple other reporters there. I know Zach Sterniolo. He's the Pocono guy. He works for the Pocono Record, and I've seen him at every time I've been at Pocono, and he was there too. And so yeah, a couple of us just chilling around, watching the TVs in the media center, and like I said, for what I saw, it was a good time in Iowa.
The only thing I really have to say, I wouldn't say it's a negative thing, but it seems like this track is, at least in the daytime, it's almost too highline oriented. If you're stuck on the bottom, it's kind of like how Bristol is without the PJ1. It's almost like almost a huge disadvantage to be on the bottom. So that's like the only thing I really have to say as far as like a gripe about Iowa. The bottom is just way too worn out, and there's a lot of patches down there, and it's just I don't think it hurts the racing per se, because I mean it's still a fantastic racetrack. It obviously is a low line track for the likes of like IndyCar, and like I said, when they run at night, the low line does work. But you're right. Without the tire strategy, I think Bell turns this into one of the more boring finishes of the year. He absolutely killed everyone. But The one good thing about it is that what would arguably be the second best car the whole entire day in Chase Briscoe, he does end up winning. I think if someone like John Hunter Nemechek took it away, it would be a little bit different. It would be a much bigger upset, just because the GMS 23 is not. I wouldn't consider it a title contender type of ride. Definitely a top 10 guy, but not by any stretch of the imagination a race winning vehicle every week. So it was good to see Chase come through, just because we've been talking about it every single week. Who's going to step in? Who's going to step up and be that fourth guy? And I don't know if it's going to be Chase Briscoe for sure. Uh, it's too early to tell. I mean, it's one race, it's one good strategy call for a win, and it's just weird. It's We'll see for sure. It sucks for Bell though, because he absolutely had the best car. Which if we're talking in the grand scheme of things, the one thing that is going to hurt him, I don't think it's going to be a huge deal unless some really, really bad luck happens in the playoffs. But he does lose 5 playoff points inevitably because of this, and Chase gains much needed 5 bonus points for the playoffs. I think him gaining those 5 playoff points will do him a better benefit than Bell losing it. So good for Briscoe. The tide kind of turned in this race between him and Custer. Custer wasn't really there for most of the race. He had his mechanical issues going into three, and ended up pretty much ending his day. But it was I love Iowa. I always love Iowa. There was a lot of really intriguing results. Ryan Sieg. I don't know what kind of hand-me-down equipment they're getting, or if they're building their own stuff at this point. But he ends up being what, top five? I think he finished third or fourth. Just impressive results for a guy that is pretty much for the most part getting low end sponsorship, nothing top 500 corporations or anything like that. So it it's crazy to see some of these guys who were not otherwise contenders with those new tires coming up and not only beating Bell but giving him a lot of trouble through that run. It was pretty awesome to see.
Just a quick note before I get into it. Sieg was running in fourth, and it was him, Briscoe, and Nemechek on the newer tires. But something happened where Sieg actually got walled. I want to say by Gregson, actually, in the closing laps, and that actually relegated Sieg back to a 12th place finish.
Oh yeah, look at that. Sad. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, it was pretty sad to watch because it looked like Sieg was definitely going to get a top five, and then Noah comes rolling in and just I don't know if he got tied off the corner or if he was just trying to pinch him in the wall or what happened, but there was definitely contact with the wall hard for Sieg that he just wasn't able. He was able to hold on and finish the race, but it was definitely, if a caution would have come out, he would have definitely been really screwed. He's lucky to come home with a 12th place finish after all that. Chase Briscoe was the second best car of the day for sure. In stage 1, he finished third. In stage 2, he finished second. He had, on his second to last pit stop, that came at lap 202. That was the incident where Michael Annett had spun. Everybody came into pit, and a lot of people put on their last sets of tires, and that included Christopher Bell, because there was, less than 50 laps to go, and, you got to figure that even if you get another caution at this point, tires aren't going to mean that much. And I would tend to agree with Christopher Bell in this situation, but Chase Briscoe ends up coming in, and it was really weird under the pit stop because I guess they got confused or something, where they filled up the car full of fuel, and one of the tire carriers went out there like he was going to change a tire, but nobody else went out there. So this he's out there, he's got the tire in his hands, or maybe he's got 2 tires in his hands, and he's got the air gun, and they're filling up the gas, and he's just standing there like, what are we doing? And then Briscoe, like, they're done filling up the car with fuel, and Briscoe's like, all right, I guess I'm going to go. And he goes, and unfortunately, he runs over the air hose, and that's a penalty. So on this restart, Briscoe's starting and end the longest line. Uh, and, you know, you got to figure, wow, that sucks. He had such a good race going on. He's done now. But he didn't take those tires. And they had another caution come out about 10 to 13 laps later, it looks like, and it's because there's fluid on the track, it says, and I can't remember what exactly it was, because I think it was a little bit more than fluid on the track. I know this is the incident where Dylan Bassett ends up hitting the track sweeper.
Was it the
um,
Brandon Brown blow up?
it might have been. It might have been Brandon Brown blowing up in this one. That sounds right. Yeah, because Brandon Brown went out at 217 and the caution came out at 219. It says so. That makes a lot of sense. So Brown blows up. There's fluid all over the track, and then Dylan Bassett hits the track sweeper. I don't know exactly what happened in that instance, but I know they opened the pits, and I don't know if he couldn't see what was going on, or his spotter was telling him get low because you have to commit, or what happened. And um, it was a cluster, and Bassett hits the track sweeper, and gave me flashbacks of when Kenseth hit the ambulance. Gives me flashbacks of when Montoya hit the jet dryer. You hate it. You hate to see it when, you know, people are out there doing their jobs, and they get involved in something, you know, like that, because you got to worry about them. They don't have the safety equipment like the drivers do. So hopefully everybody was okay with that one. But this is the caution now where the strategy is on. And I think it ends up being about maybe 15 lap newer tires for these guys, for Briscoe, for Hunter Nemechek, for what you call it, for Ryan Sieg. So they get the restart, they go, and Hunter Nemechek's trying, and he can't get by, and then Bell's holding him off, and then Briscoe comes into the picture, and Briscoe goes high, and he's able to get around Nemechek, but Nemechek doesn't want to give it up, so those two were racing each other, and I leaned over to the reporter who was sitting next to me. I'm like, Bell's going to win this race because they're going to take each other out. And that's what it looked like was going to happen, because Nemechek was just being like, no, I'm going to go win. And then Briscoe's like, no, I'm going to go win. And they would not, neither would concede. One would get the advantage, and then the other would, you know, make a bonsai move and get back in front. And they just kept slowing each other down. Eventually, Nemechek gets a little bit out of the groove and slows down, and Briscoe's now on his own, and now Nemechek's fallen into the clutches of the rest of the field. Briscoe keeps closing in, finally gets up to Bell, and I thought we were going to see more of the same, honestly. I thought Bell, even though he was on older tires there, he had such a way with his car this entire race that it just didn't seem possible or plausible that he was going to get past. But eventually Chase Briscoe does it. He gets around, 7 laps to go. And at that point, he pulls out to pretty decent advantage, and I think he ended up winning by just over a second. So, really happy for Chase Briscoe. I mean, he won at the Roval last year, when he wasn't full time, and now he is full time, and he's got a win, and he's locked into the playoffs now. So, you know, I mean, I tend to agree with you about the whole low line not being that good during the daytime, because I know I watched Allgaier. I always got my eye on Allgaier, and he was trying everything he could to make up positions, and he was like one of the few people that would venture low to see what would happen, and every time he went low, it just completely sent him even further back. And I think at one point he was outside the top 10. He was just trying everything he could to get up there, and he fought back for a 6th place finish, which was I guess decent. But I mean, The dude won here last year, and I was kind of expecting that to be a little bit more of the same this year, and that just didn't end up being the case this year in either race. Christopher Bell was definitely the dominant car in both races, and had they not gotten that late race caution where Briscoe was able to get tires, I mean, I don't think we're talking about the same story here. I think we're talking about a Iowa sweep for Christopher Bell. He he led 234 of the 250 laps. I mean, come on, it's just good racing, but at the same time, you really want to see a little bit more parity up front.
Going back to the Dylan Bassett incident, apparently his spotter did warn him, "Hey, there's a sweeper over there." There was there was actually two of them. So I think in Bassett's mind, okay, let's get around this one. And I forget who was following him because they almost did the exact same thing that Bassett did.
I think it
Uh,
was Greg Galding.
yeah. So they are going the exact path, same exact path, and Bassett must have thought, "Hey, this is the only one. They can't possibly be two. He would have told me there was two." But I mean, there's so much dirt and dust over there. They should have honestly they shouldn't have opened up the pits. I really apparently Steve O'Donnell talked about it today on some show, radio show or podcast or whatever, and pretty much just it is what it is. I honestly think that's a big L for NASCAR and opening the pits when they really should not have opened it. There's a lot of laps left. There's no real point to rush it. Put a put a delay on it for a couple laps and make sure it's clean and safe because this has happened now 3 or 4 times. I mean, I know Boyer hit something. I think it was either a jet dryer or something. Uh, I think it was last year or 2 years ago. Kenseth hit the ambulance. Montoya's is just a freak incident. You can't really do anything about that. But they really can't be doing this anymore. It's a really bad look. It's really unsafe, like you mentioned, for these workers who are not. They're probably just in regular fire suits. They're not wearing any kind of crazy harnesses in the trucks. I'm sure. So it's just it's a bad look that you're putting all this dirt in these drivers' faces and then opening the pits thinking, oh, it's clear, and then obviously it's not. So that's just bad. And then you got the race, and like you mentioned, the High Line was definitely the dominant groove, and I'm okay with it to an extent. Like I said, I love Iowa. It's probably my favorite track on the in the top three series at this point. Um, I thought the race was great, minus Bell dominating it. The one thing about Iowa is that it's small enough to be somewhat of a short track, so you've got the luxury of the bumping and banging, but it's also you're running about 150 miles an hour, so it's got that speedway feel, and you can run. It's a 60-foot wide track, so they're running all over the place. So I really enjoyed the race. I watched about 85% of it live, and I thought it was the best race of the weekend, just because we got a new winner. There was strategy involved with tires, which is always nice in the Xfinity series because of the limited sets. I think that's something that Cup should venture in eventually, just for the sake of. I mean, if they're going to artificially entertain us to a point, they might as well do it even more with the limited sets to save a little bit of money. So that's my take on it.
You know, they do limit the sets a little bit, not as greatly as
They
they.
have like 10 instead of 15. I mean, it's not much different.
No, you're right. You're right. But I have seen some races where it gets down to the end of the race, and if somebody would have saved an extra set, they might have been able to slap them on and do something with them. But everybody had used their tires at that point. So I mean, it's definitely not to the level of the Xfinity or the Truck Series, but at the same time, it is still affecting them in some way. But yeah, Xfinity, where I think we're over and done with that. I'm not even going to talk points because we're not going to talk points. So let's move on to the main event of the weekend, and we go back to Pocono, Pennsylvania, and we see that it's the Gander RV 400 at Pocono Raceway You've got Kevin Harvick in the Gen X car, which the Gen X car felt more like a millennial car than the millennial car
It
did.
was a retro wave car. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was one of the best paint schemes that I've ever seen. It was really fun, really cool to look at. And I really wish he would have won just for the fact that I would have gotten his tiny diecast to put on my tiny shelf in my tiny car. But I have to now order a Denny Hamlin FedEx ground car because Denny Hamlin was the winner on Sunday afternoon. He won it by leading 32 laps of the 163. There was 160 scheduled. They went 3 laps into overtime. The time of the race was just under 3 hours. They should have started the race at 1 o'clock. I hate these races that start at 3 or later. It was really dumb because they ended up having a weather delay at one point. It was right around the time the race would have ended if they would have started at 1. Just saying. But so yeah. So Denny Hamlin ended up winning, and the compelling thing to me about this race was the way different strategies that were being played out by so many of the front contenders. You had a clear strategy out there by Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick's strategy was, I'm going to pit every 40 laps. I don't care if there's a caution. I don't care if there's a whatchamacallit, like something happening with the car, or him losing positions, or stage break end, or whatever it was. So Kevin Harvick clearly was pitting 40, 80, and 120. And that was going to be his 3 pit stops, and he was going to go on from there and try and win the race. Kyle Busch, a little bit different of a strategy. He ended up splitting the first stage, which allowed him to go on and win the first stage. Then in the second stage, he was going to stay out as long as he possibly could, probably up until about 10 laps to go if there were no cautions. Then he'd pit, and then he'd split the final stage in half, where he'd probably do about 30-30 because it's about it's not about, it is a 60-lap stage. And then try and go for the win from there. But, of course, there were cautions in this event. It's not just you race stage 1, there's a caution, race stage 2, there's a caution, then it's all green. No, there's going to be cautions, and these cautions kind of threw a wrench in both Harvick and Busch's plans, to the fact that at lap 115, when that caution had come out, that kind of set the mood for the rest of the race. You had Harvick actually give up on his strategy of coming in every 40 laps, and he pitted early with everybody else, and then Kyle Busch is like, no, I'm going to stay on my strategy, and he ends up staying out. So when they get the green flag, everybody's pretty much in like fuel save mode, and you got the Gibbs Toyotas up front. You got Eric Jones, very impressive. You got Denny Hamlin. You got Martin Truex Jr. They're all up there. Kyle Busch, he's now in the back because of his pit strategy to pit. I'm messing it up a little bit. He pitted at the end of stage 2, gave up stage 2, ended up at the back, made his way to the front at that 115 lap where Priest absolutely demolished the wall because everybody pitted except for him. But everybody else was going to try to make it, and Kyle Busch definitely couldn't because he pitted. He was more than 60 laps to go by the time he pitted. So Busch ends up pitting, gives the lead to Eric Jones. Eric Jones has the lead. He ends up losing the lead to Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin takes over. You don't really know if anybody's going to make it on gas at this point. And then with like 6 laps to go, number 53 car, Josh Bilicki, he ends up, I think he broke a drive shaft or something. I saw a picture on Facebook somewhere where that thing was absolutely mangled. He ends up stopping on one of the back stretches, and they have to slow the caution. They have to throw the caution.
That was a weird caution, by the way. That was a really strange whatever that was.
Yeah, he like pulled over and I don't know if he could have coasted any further or what, but he's like he didn't even try. He just pulled over and stopped and that was it. So, caution comes out. Field is bunched back up. You got to figure they saved enough gas at this point. So, you see everybody and their mother out there, you know, trying to get as much as they can on this, what you would think might be the final restart. And then you get Kurt Busch and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. going at it. And I believe it was Stenhouse who just like ran through Busch. Busch got like loose and Stenhouse just was like, all right, I'm just going to keep going and not care that you're loose in front of me. And ended up taking him out going straight. And
He had like a blown, I wouldn't say it was a blown tire. He definitely smacked the wall and he was going really slow. But it's like as if like Stenhouse wanted the caution to come out and he just dumped him.
yep, and he dumped him right into Michael McDowell, and that was a pretty hard lick. Caution comes out again, and they're in overtime. And even though they're going 3 extra laps at this point, everybody's good on fuel now. They saved it all under these 2 caution periods. It's nobody's going to be running out of gas. So they get the restart, and Denny Hamlin's leader, and Eric Jones is second, and that's how they finish. Denny Hamlin as the winner, Eric Jones second, Martin Truex Jr. third, William Byron came in fourth, and Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson put on a show. I don't know if they showed it on the broadcast, but Kyle Larson was the man when it came to making moves. There wasn't a lot of people making moves, but Kyle Larson was making them. He was going off. He figured out that high line. It was like there was like 4 drivers that figured out the high line, the PJ1. It was Kyle Larson who seemed to be the best of it. Denny Hamlin, who won the race, of course, and then Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch. Those 4 seemed to really had gotten the outside groove with the PJ1 in it, but everybody else was kind of like staying low, or if they would venture out there, it was kind of scary for him. But I am looking at, because I've been talking about it, the quality passes for this week, very low amount of quality passes.
What about
Um,
compared to earlier this year?
that's a good idea. I'll get back to you on that.
Because I do think the PJ1 helped. And I can only imagine it just improved everything because we were talking about it a little bit before we went on air, but the only 2 passes that I really thought about that was for the lead, and normally at Pocono we don't see any passes for the lead. So the fact we're talking about any in general is pretty crazy. The first one was with Bush over Harvick, and it was Harvick's car just died. It just fell off halfway through the race. I don't know what happened. Bush ended up being probably the best car, and then Hamlin was a close second, and he obviously ended up winning because of strategy. But the fact that they actually could use a second groove at Pocono, it obviously helped the racing. Once again, something we were talking about before, and I think we talked about it the first go around Pocono. The fact that they really can't suck up and pass is really discouraging. And I was watching a great example where Harvick was right up on Joey Logano's ass and just got a huge run out of one. And you think, okay, he's just gonna suck up, pull around, and call it a day. He gets right about car length away, and then he starts pushing Logano forward, and it's all because of the way the car is constructed. And it's a real shame. I don't think they did this on purpose when they were building the Gen 6, but it produces such a bubble and so much turbulence behind the car that it basically causes this bubble of air that we've been plagued with at the super speedways. Now it happens at the speedways and at these long ovals. So it's just like, what the hell? It's just a weird, bizarre side effect to this car, and they've done everything that they can to make the racing better, and they've just never found a successful package that works everywhere. Obviously, it's been a little bit better at the mile and a half. So I think, hello Jarvis, I think it'd be a lot better I think the PJ1 would have been a lot better with the 2018 package, just because it seems like it was better with the racing overall was closer from a handling standpoint when they had a 2.5 inch spoiler instead of an 8 inch spoiler. So I wish we could have go back and see how that would be. I wonder if they're going to do anything different next year with the package. I kind of hope they do. Like maybe they'll do the 550 horsepower, but they'll go back to the smaller spoiler to see how it is. You might as well try something different for 2020. We'll see. And then they keep the aero ducts or whatever they decide to do. We'll find out next year for that. But I do think the PJ1 helped tremendously in the fact that it actually created a pass for the lead, which we probably would have never had with the package as is.
So I'm taking a look. I was able to pull up the 2019 June race. Uh, they definitely were lower than this time around. So it wasn't by much. I'd say maybe about anywhere from 100 to 200 more passes this time than the last time. I think that more or less comes down to the track. But I mean, you could say that the PJ1 did help. I mean, I think it was maybe a warmer race in June than it was in this time, because it was very cool this weekend, um like mid 70s around there, maybe gotten up to 80 at one point, but it was like 80, 85 and muggy earlier in the year, so maybe the PJ1 would have helped a little bit more then, because the PJ1 seems to really only work when it is hot and slick, and and when you use it at tracks where it's not so hot, it doesn't perform as well as it could have. But it definitely, I would say that it definitely did help this race out, even the slightest bit. Looking at the playoff picture moving forward, you've got Eric Jones. He's been on a really good tear lately. He got a second place finish here this weekend, and he moves up to 13th in the standings. Uh, I think he's got 37 points over the final spot of Ryan Newman currently. And then it's another 12 points back to Jimmy Johnson in 17th. So that's about a 44-point advantage right now. If I'm mathing correctly. No, I'm not mathing correctly, because it tells me right here that it's a 39-point advantage. So Eric Jones has 39 points over Jimmy Johnson, which is pretty good, all things considered. Kyle Larson, he's got 37 points over Jimmy Johnson, and then it gets really tight. Clint Boyer's got 12 points, Ryan Newman's got 12 points. Jimmy Johnson's 12 points back, and then Daniel Suarez, he's 31 points back. I would say that both Paul Menard and Ricky Stenhouse, who
They're
both,
out.
yeah, they're not gonna make it on points at this point. There's 5 races left. I think they've got too much of a gap. So you look at those drivers, as we talked about last week, as we talked about the week before. The drivers from about 13th to 18th, maybe 13th and 14th are in a little bit better position. So we really look at 15th to 18th in this situation, where you got, for those drivers, it's Clint Boyer, Ryan Newman, Jimmy Johnson, and Daniel Suarez. And I mean, it could go any way, which way with those 4. I mean, Ryan Newman has put on an impressive show for a lot of this season, considering that he's in a car that the primary driver ended up losing his ride over because of performance. And you could tell that it wasn't just the driver, because you put in a champion like Matt Kenseth into the car and it performs just the same, if not, a little bit worse. So that 6 car definitely has come a long way. Not completely all the way back, because it's just, Roush Fenway Racing is not one of the top teams at this juncture. So you got Newman in the 6 car, definitely outperforming the level of the parts and pieces in that car. You've got Jimmy Johnson, who's out, who's never missed one. Clint Boyer, who's currently in, who's just been having an awful season. And then you got Daniel Suarez, who's Boyer's teammate, and I mean Suarez could win on any given week. So could Boyer. So it'd be really interesting to see. They're going into Watkins Glen this weekend. We all know that the Glen could be a wild card race, or could not be. It might just be a straightforward race where it's, one of the Toyota guys going on to win, or one of the Penske guys going on to win. So Watkins Glen will be interesting, and then you've got Michigan, Bristol, Darlington, and Indianapolis to round out the season. So 5 races left. I'd have to say that, the way that the points currently are shaking up, I don't think Boyer is going to make it, but I do think Jimmy Johnson is, especially now that he's got a new crew chief.
You think that's see? I'm thinking the opposite. I mean, yeah, Boyer's struggling. He's definitely. I mean, Suarez is their worst performer, but I think we all expected that. I'm kind of surprised to see that Almirola is outperforming Boyer this much. It's weird because Almirola only has one top 10 or one top 5, and Boyer's definitely got more top end speed. He's got 5, and he's been damn near close to a win. So he's the king of inconsistent right now. It's going to be a matter of if he can pull it together. I The way it's been, I would take Boyer over Johnson, especially with the new crew chief. It's I think it's too little, too late for Johnson to kind of gel with a new crew chief. It takes years for people to have chemistry. It takes a long time for crew chiefs and drivers to click. It's rare that you see an Everham and Gordon combo, or a Knaus and Johnson combo, or an Inman Petty combo, or a Paul Wolf and Keselowski combo. It's rare, and there's a reason why those guys. Childers and Harvick is another one. Perrin and Truex. I mean, it's so rare to see. It takes some time for that to click, for the most part, and I just don't see that happening with Jimmy. You put that, and then you kind of combine it with the fact that Hendrick is kind of falling off of the momentum that they had from the mid-season mark at Chicago, and with Chase winning at Dega and Bowman winning at Chicagoland and all this and that. I mean, I know William Byron had a great effort this week, so I mean they got that. But I think that kind of is a combination of the way the restarts settle out and all that. I don't think that was more of like he's been in the top 5 the whole entire day, and Chase Elliott had his issues. So I think Hendrick is kind of back on their path of, we're gonna put a driver or two in the playoffs, but we're not really gonna have much of a threat. As of right now, they got 3 guys in the playoffs. So good for them. That's awesome to see. But I think Jimmy's going to be the odd man out there. It's a shame to think that that's going to be the case. We got a 7-time champion kind of experiencing the same slump that we saw Jeff Gordon have around this stage of his career back in like the 20, like what was it, 2010, 2009, 2008. Winning a race or 2 here and there, and that's about it. And it's kind of sad to see deja vu with the Hendrick guy, but I mean, all great streaks and all legacies and dynasties do come to an end at some point, and I think we're starting to see that with Jimmy.
Let me make the case for Cliff Daniels, who is Jimmy Johnson's new crew chief. He's been an engineer with Jimmy for the last couple of seasons, so he's been working in-house already with Johnson and with Johnson's crew. So he's not like just some random guy that they picked off the street, or somebody in the feeder team like Kevin Mendering was. Kevin Mendering was working with the 1 car for the last couple of seasons. He hasn't been working on the 48 like Cliff Daniels has. So they promoted Mendering up to this position without really being able to gel with Johnson with the rest of the crew. Daniels has the advantage where he already has that down packed, where he's just getting promoted in house. So, and from what I can tell, they have a pretty decent relationship already, and Jimmy's actually likened him somewhat to Chad Knaus. So, I I don't know much about this guy other than he's already been with the team and that everybody's speaking very highly of him. So, I do want to give I wanted to call him Chase there. I want to give Cliff Daniels the benefit of the doubt here. Um, I feel like he might be in a better position to succeed than Kevin Mendering ever was or would be. So I'm looking forward to seeing almost immediate results. Maybe not this weekend at the Glen, but the next time that Hendrick is up front, I expect Jimmy to be the leader of them. Whether that come at Michigan, Bristol, Darlington, or Indianapolis, I really do think that Jimmy's going to be able to get into the playoffs. And this change was almost necessary for him because I don't think he would have been able to make the playoffs with his current crew chief situation.
We'll see. I think the way the playoffs stand now, barring anything crazy, um, I think we're kind of in agreement that Suarez is not going to make it in.
Oh yeah.
Barring some crazy result, anything is possible. Uh, I mean, you never know. But Matt DiBenedetto, he's been one of the he's been so fast lately. It's so weird. I don't know if they're giving him JGR equipment full on now or what, but he's been racking off really good finishes. So you never know. He might sneak one here going into the playoffs. But I think personally, unless there's some crazy win, the top 16 is what it is. Uh, Newman's doing really well. He's running really consistent. I think Boyer, it's just a matter of time before he starts being a little bit more consistent. I think he's just got to put 2 or 3 solid races together, and I think he'll be fine. Uh, I don't know. I'm a little skeptical of the Jimmy situation because I know how it can be with crew chiefs, and there's a reason why when a team loses their main crew chief, they say it's a huge deal because it really is. It really is a big deal. And I agree with you that it's probably going to be a better. They should have probably done this to start the year. It's rare when an Xfinity guy ends up being an immediate success in Cup. So we'll see how it works for that. One thing I wanted to talk about, we kind of talked about it a little bit before we went live. The I know you could hear it when you're there, just because they have it pulled up. But the
Mm.
NBC is doing a fantastic job right now. Hello, dogs. uh, from a standpoint of changing their broadcast style. They brought in Mike Bagley this week. Everyone knows Mike Bagley if you watch NASCAR. He's an MRN guy, makes everything exciting, and it's so crazy to see what Fox did this year, and they really didn't do anything different. It was a salute to DW leaving, and it was honestly the first half of the year was incredibly stale. From not only the racing not being that great, but the broadcast was just incredibly boring and the same thing every single week. With NBC, I don't know what it is. I mean, Rick Allen's honestly, he's a great commentator. He's a great lead guy. Um, but he's honestly just part of it. I think when you got Jeff and Steve and Dale Jr. there, they're the most exciting part of the whole entire show. And then you add Mike Bagley as a part of it for this radio style broadcast. I think they're doing such a good job, and they deserve any bit of credit for if there's any ratings increases from the time that Fox took over to the time NBC takes over. If there's a huge ratings increase, like we're talking about hundreds of thousand people tuning in, it's going to be because of them. They're doing such a great job week to week, and I can't help but give them enough credit.
It's unfortunate because this past week, they actually did have a decrease in viewership. And that could be tied to having to split the time with the IndyCar race being on NBC. Um, I don't know why they scheduled it that way. Last year they scheduled it with IndyCar, with them being on CNBC. But I guess the network was open to putting one of the races on NBC, and I feel like they made the wrong choice by putting IndyCar on NBC, because I think you would have had a much better viewership from putting NASCAR on the main channel and not on the NBCSN.
I don't know why they didn't just do Cup at 1 and then run the IndyCar race at 4:30.
The whole I You're gonna make me go on a rant right now, and I don't want to, because I want to talk about this NBC versus Fox thing. But there is absolutely no freaking reason why we're doing these cup races at tracks without lights at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the summer. I mean,
at Pocono where it rains
at
all
any
the
it
time.
doesn't even matter that it's at Pocono. I mean, it could be at any track. I mean, even tracks with lights. I mean, God damn it! It's so infuriating sometimes that we're just sitting around waiting for the race to start. I mean, last week they baked all the fans in the heat until they were ready to start the race at like 3 o'clock. Thankfully, we didn't have any weather come in at New Hampshire, but I mean, it was so stupid just waiting around when we could have had that race going at 1 o'clock. We could have had this race going at 1 o'clock. It would have been. I need to stop because I want to talk about this NBC. NBC has the advantage of having the races to the playoff. Yes, you got Fox. They come in. They start off the year. You got the beginning of the year excitement. But a lot of that is, you've got unknowns. It's a new aero package, so they haven't really figured out a lot yet. So the racing isn't as great yet because they haven't figured out too much. On top of that, you've got three guys. Specifically, you had Darrell Waltrip, and I don't want to like be here and like crap on Darrell Waltrip at all, but I mean, he's been doing this for a long time, and he's kind of just there at this point. Mike Joy's always given really good insight, but he's kind of getting old now. And then you got Jeff Gordon, who's there, who's still kind of learning his way. And Dale Jr. for the NBC side is also kind of learning his way, but he's got the advantage of having a much younger crowd to work with. He's got Rick Allen, he's got Jeff Burton, he's got Steve Letarte. That's a much younger group of guys to lean on to get the broadcast done. I feel like NBC definitely has more resources that allows them to put more into their broadcast, pre-race, during race, and post-race. They've got so many damn people that it's, they split it up this weekend between Iowa and Pocono, and you still had people left over. You had AJ Allmendinger left over. They they ended up swapping him with Bagley for MRN, just so that MRN had an extra guy, because they would have been short one. Like I said, NBC's got so many resources that they could do stuff like that. They pull in Mike Bagley, like you said, to do this radio style broadcast. They're going to do it again next week at Watkins Glen, which is where it originated from, at least on the TV side, that is. So I feel like all the things are working in favor of NBC, where they've really got a lot more on the table to work with, and they've got the races leading up to the playoffs. So you got people making dumber moves on the track. You got people being desperate, and that sometimes turns into people getting moved out of the way, and tempers flaring, and I think it just works in NBC's favor that they take over at the time that they do. And that's not saying that that's the only reason. I just listed a bunch of reasons why they've also got an advantage, but um, it's not to say I don't like the Fox broadcast either, because I really do enjoy. I enjoy all of it. I think that Fox puts on a pretty good show with what they've got. It's just that NBC seems a little bit more invested in it, and looking at like all of NBC's other ventures, they got all of IndyCar, they've got all of IMSA, they got a bunch of other motorsports. They're trying to be the motorsports masters when it comes to, television and having the rights to all this stuff. So I it just yeah, I would definitely take NBC broadcasts over Fox broadcasts any day. Um, they just it has a lot to do with the timing of it. I feel maybe a little bit more than the production, but the production definitely goes into it too.
Yeah, and I think you have a good point as far as like there's definitely an age difference, and I think like I'm a huge like from a driver standpoint, I'm a huge Gordon fan. I think anyone that knows me knows that I'm a huge Jeff Gordon fan. And when I heard that he was going to do the commentary, I was initially pretty excited because I mean he's a good speaker, he's eloquent, he's articulate, he's the pretty boy among all these rednecks per se. So I thought he would do a good job. And honestly, like I'm just not a fan of his from a broadcasting standpoint. He really hasn't shown that organic enthusiasm that Steve Letarte possesses, that Jeff Burton possesses, that Dale Earnhardt Jr. possesses. I think if every single week it's those three, I don't even need Rick Allen. Rick Allen's a top three, top five commentator in motorsports. He's up there for sure. If you get rid of him, it's still a top broadcast just because there's they and it's to some people it's actually a detriment and it's a criticism. They make everything so exciting. They can make a battle for 15th sound like the most awesome thing ever, which is kind of a note and a little bit of a stealing from MRN and the radio stuff. Like you have to animate it and make it so over the top, exciting and exuberant, and oh my god, they're side by side. Oh, they're sliding out of the corner. Wow, but they're doing so well. And I wonder if with Fox changing it up next year with Daryl leaving, if they're going to bring someone in that's a little bit more of that enthusiastic type. I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they're just going to stick with the two with Jeff and Mike Joy. I hope they bring back Larry because Larry's got that natural enthusiasm, and I think the one thing that they've been missing is the fact that Larry and DW were really good together. They had that natural chemistry, and it started from the get go. If you look at 2001 broadcasts, they're very good. They're the exact same as they were back in the early 2010s when they were still together. So I mean, it's just I don't know what it is. I hope it's someone good if they decide to bring someone new in. If they bring back Larry, I think that's going to help significantly. But I think you're right also in the sense that this is the time of year that gets the most exciting. But I think it's because NBC's doing that well of a job. They make everything good. And where I kind of wouldn't really care to listen to Fox when I was at work, I enjoy listening to the broadcast when NBC is on because they do stuff different with Bagley. And I thought it was awesome that during the race when Priest wrecked, like Bagley jumps in, trouble off of turn one, Ryan Priest hard into the outside wall. Like that was awesome. That is such an urgent, like, oh my God, this is crazy. It was so cool to see and hear. And I hope that it evolves into something that the whole entire broadcasting platform kind of moves towards because as fans we both know that majority of people if they could listen to MRNs and have it live and in sync with the racing broadcast of Fox or even NBC in the past, we would do it 100%. It's just better, 100% better because it's just the urgency, the excitement, the enthusiasm is there, and it's awesome. And now we get it with NBC this week, and then we get it. I think they're going to do it at Indy as well. It's got the same format as Pocono. It's a huge track with a couple corners that are uh, can't really see the whole entire track. So I think it's going to be awesome to see, and I think it's a great idea that they've adapted into their broadcast style.
I'll tell you what. When I go to these racetracks and I get to sit in the press box, it annoys me to no end that some of these reporters will demand that the live feed be taken down and that they go to the broadcast feed, and which has a delay on it, of course, because one, I prefer to listen to the live feed because the live feed usually has the MRN RPRN crew. Like you said, a lot of fans and a lot of people like me too. Like, we prefer to listen to the radio broadcast because they make it so exciting, and it's they put a lot more detail into it because they have to, because there's no visuals with it. On television, they got the whole visual thing going for it. They can have a conversation about like what they had for dinner last night, and then all the information that they would be talking about on radio is just scrolling on the screen and people can just read it. So radio definitely brings more to the table as far as like descriptive wording, which is always been a preference of mine. With Fox, with Larry McReynolds in particular, he would be like a no-brainer to me if he wasn't also up there in age. I listen to Larry every day when I drive to and from work. He's on the radio now, with On Track, with Danielle Trotta on Sirius XM, and just the level of like knowledge that this man has is absolutely incredible. It's like a no-brainer to put him back in the booth if that becomes a possibility. But at the same time, it's like he's getting up there in age too. So none of them are getting any younger. NBC couldn't, they've got a crew that it could still be their crew in 15 to 20 years just because of the age of all of them. So Fox doesn't have that luxury with their top talent. DW's retired, and I'm sure Larry and Mike have got to be thinking about it too, just because they've been doing it for so long. But I digress. I would have to give a tip of the cap to NBC over Fox for their coverage so far this year and in past years, just because they're coming up with new ideas. They're coming up with different things that are keeping it fresh, keeping it interesting, keeping people wanting to listen to the television as opposed to the regular the radio broadcast. And NBC's also, they've got a soft spot in my heart too, because they're getting very heavily involved with the esports side of everything, the eNASCAR side of everything. They've been in past years showing the Parker Kligerman on the simulator and going around and showing these tracks, and now just as recently as this past Thursday, it was the very first ever eNASCAR live broadcast on a network television station. They brought 35 drivers, and it was cool because it was like a fantasy thing that you wouldn't get in real life. They put Cup cars on Iowa Speedway, which we all know Iowa only does the Xfinity and the trucks. They don't do Cup, and Cup doesn't have a date, and Cup doesn't have a date in the near future either. So it was cool to see them take the virtual cars, put them on the virtual track to see what, maybe a possibility would be with the similar aero package. And let me first say that this whole iRacing on NBCSN, everything that went into this broadcast just was right. It was all right. Everything was perfect. Everything worked exactly how it needed to work. They had a good race. They had a lot of action. They had, a lot of their top drivers up there performing. And then at the very end of it all, you had two of the best. You had Ryan Luza and Nick Ottinger just going at it, and it was very similar to the Xfinity race where it seemed like the high line had such an advantage in the daytime over the bottom line. But what was cool was you saw these guys just dive it in anyway and then pull the slide job. And they were going back and forth for a couple laps. And eventually, on the last lap, Ottinger was able to make the right move around Luza and hold him off in a side-by-side battle to the line. It was honestly one of the best sim races I've ever seen, and it was really cool that it ended up being the first one on television.
Yeah, I talked to Blake about it just because he was in the race and he did so well. They apparently they put Parker in the server a little bit earlier, so he had a little bit cleaner track and a little bit cooler track, and that's how he was on the pole and all this and that. But whatever. The racing was fantastic from beginning to end, and uh, I can't picture another scenario that would have been better for iRacing and for Peak and for NBCSN to showcase this. This is something that has a lot of divisiveness or divisiveness, however you say the word. There's a lot of divide as far as, is this racing? Is this something that should be pushed heavily as an entertainment platform? Because uh, we know of like Rocket League, League of Legends. There's a lot of Counter Strike. There's a lot of platforms. Fortnite. There's a lot of platforms in the world of esports that get network deals, whether it's the NBC universe. I know they do stuff on USA. You got Turner Broadcasting on TBS and TNT Broadcasting esports. So it's not like it's something that's new. I know uh, ESPN does Madden, and I think they've done a little bit of NBA with their 2K stuff. So it's not even like it's a new thing. It's just new for NASCAR and it's new for motorsports. And I think if we're talking about, if you look tuned in at 5 p.m. on Thursday and you watch that race and you saw that and objectively, this is a race. This is the same kind of racing that I can see in real life, and you suspend your reality a little bit and you suspend the belief like this is not just a game. This is something that these guys are putting in hundreds of hours a month, just cranking out laps, working on setups. Because trust me, I know because I'm in the team speak of one of the big teams in Peak. They are on and testing and working on stuff as we speak, and they work on it for 5, 6, 7 hours a day just to get a setup for a race in 2 weeks. And it's just incredible to see the work that they put into it. And it was just so cool to see guys that I've raced all these years. Brandon Cattell, Chris Overland, Blake Reynolds. I mean, we've had those guys in our leagues on NR years ago. But it's just so cool to see that like they're racing on NBCSN against a guy like Parker Kligerman, who, I mean, he's not like the greatest driver ever, but he's a freaking cup driver. He runs in the 96 car, and he was getting spanked. He was getting absolutely spanked by a bunch of guys. They do this every week, and it was fixed setup, so you can't really say, oh, it was setup or whatever. It was all the same, and he's run the sim before, so, I mean, these guys put on a clinic and they put on one of the best races, if we're talking like objectively speaking, not only of the peak season, but one of the best races that has been on network television this year. It was absolutely incredible, and you got to give them credit for having the courage and having the foresight to put this event on TV for NASCAR Live, and put it on a platform where everyone can watch for the most part. It's on NBCSN. Most people have that, And I, like I said, a lot of people didn't like it. They say it's fake, and they say, oh, it's not the same. They should be putting grassroots racing on. If there, oh, there's modifieds racing in the Northeast right now. Why are we looking at this crap? Like, go to fanschoice.tv. They plug it all the time on NBCSN. Go on fanschoice.tv if you want to watch local track racing. It happens all the time. You can go watch it for free. This is something that's brand new, and it needs to be pushed because there are teams getting involved. Roush is involved. Gibbs is involved. Steve Letarte, part of NBCSN, is involved. Parker Kligerman and Jeff Burton are involved. Like, Dale Jr. is involved. It's just, and I think that's part of it. Like, there's a huge platform that's all a part of it, and it's just so cool. It was so amazing to see that there are people that I race and people that I consider friends of mine racing on NBCSN on a live stage in front of hundreds of thousands of people. It's just so cool to think about.
I'll tell you what. They brought in Evan Pasoko from RaceSpot TV. He's one of the three guys who does the broadcast every other Tuesday for the Peak Series. Normally, they brought him in on NBCSN, so you got that almost that hybrid feel going on, where it felt like it was a peak race that you're watching on the internet, but then you also got commentary coming in from Jeff Burton and Steve Letarte. It was really cool. Everything that iRacing, that NBC, everything that NASCAR did to make this happen, and the way that it happened, and everything that went down, it was beautiful to see. It was really beautiful. I was glued to my screen. I made sure that I took break at work, specifically from 5 to 6, just so I could watch the entire hour of everything that went on. The pre-race, they got to talk about some of the drivers, their accomplishments. They got to talk to some of the drivers, or not. They didn't talk to. They talked to Ottinger after the race, but they got to see like some of these guys. Who is it? It's the Ben Nelson.
Ben Nelson, yeah, he's teammates with Blake Reynolds.
He's got the VR setup, and they were showing him in his VR on this program. It was they really got in depth into it, and it really was one of the coolest things that they've ever done, and also one of the reasons why I would say NBC's got the edge up on Fox because of this. You know, they're embracing it. They are. They've played clips throughout the season as well, so it's really cool to see. Talking about the race itself, just again, you got, it was a fixed setup race, so it wasn't like you said, you couldn't just say it was just some guys with a setup that were out there doing really good. Besides Ottinger and Luza, who were the top two with the side-by-side battle, you had Blake Reynolds in third. Brian Schoenberg, he was really impressive. He ended up fourth after everything was said and done. Jimmy Mullis, who won at Pocono 2 days earlier in the official race. They designated this on TV race as an all-star race, and they're going to be doing a couple more of them, I believe. But the points-paying race was on Tuesday at Pocono, and Jimmy Mullis was the winner in that. He came in fifth in the all-star race. Then you had Zach Novak, who's won a couple races. You had Kane Cook up there. Kane Cook isn't even signed with a team. He's an independent, and he was up there finishing in the top 10. Logan Clampett, who is one of the Burton Kligerman drivers, and then you got the two Wood brothers, teammates of Chris Overland and Ray Alfalo, who rounded out the top 10. So you had a really good mix of different drivers and stuff in the top 10 that were all racing and battling hard for the win. I mean, I don't want to like, I don't want to like hover over it too much or anything like that, but it was a really good show, and I can't wait to see more of it, because I mean, I look at they just did the Fortnite championship, and this kid Kyle, whatever his name is, I can't even pronounce that. He just won $3 million. Yeah, three
Yes,
million
$3 million.
dollars. Like that amount of money blows my mind for that. That's a first person shooter game. Imagine the possibilities with. I mean, they're already doing 100 grand this year for peak, but imagine if this got bigger. Imagine if they started putting the actual races, the points paying races on NBCSN
Right.
at like 9 o'clock at night on Tuesdays. Um, it would blow my mind to see it. And I think that's where it's trending towards, because it's getting a positive response. I mean, you got some of those boomers on Facebook, and they'll be like, "This isn't real racing. Go support your local short track," like you were saying before. But um, NASCAR itself has an identity crisis going on, where you've got a lot of the old guard, and you've got not a lot of newer fans out there, and NASCAR's trying to attract newer fans, and the old guard kind of feels like they're kind of getting left out. But NASCAR's not going to survive without new fans. So you've got to have stuff like the esports. You got to have stuff like, you know, quote unquote gimmicks that are going on, just to attract newer fans, newer people, get them to be lifelong fans, and take the place of the old guard. A lot of these things that NASCAR does, me and you don't agree with, because we've been part of this fan base for our entire lives. So we don't need the gimmicks to stay along and be here. But this is one of the things. Esports is like one of the biggest trends in the world right now. And NASCAR, I think they're getting into it at like almost a perfect time. It's going to be interesting to see it all work out and play out, and I'm really hoping that it does. And I think this was a good first step.
I agree, and I think I'm curious to see if and when they do it again. Just and I hope it's at a better time, because I just don't see why not. Why not give it a shot? Why not? Why don't they? Barring some crazy event happening on a Tuesday night, why don't they record and broadcast the finale? Put the finale on NBCSN. Show the world how great this can be and how fun it is, and how similar it is to the real thing. Because in many aspects, I mean, we've both been watching every single race this year, whether it's not for entertainment or you're doing it from a journalistic standpoint. The racing oftentimes is better than the on track product
Mm-hmm.
for the Cup Series. I mean, you look at Auto Club, the racing was awesome. Michigan's coming up. Get ready. It's going to be insane. It's going to be insane. I'll just say that. So I just don't see why they don't do something that's going to put this on the map. And just like the All Star race, it produced a great finish. All it takes is great racing and an entertaining product for this to take off. And it's a great first step of hopefully many to come, because I honestly think you're right that they very well could turn this into a profitable effort where people are watching. Because I don't think I can't think of anything that's going on Tuesday nights that I would tune into NBCSN. But if that started putting they started putting that on NBCSN, you better believe I'd either have it on my phone or on my TV at home. So I think it would be a good move for their motorsports platform. They're the king of uh, getting these obscure sports per se. They've got soccer. They've got the Premier League. They got the EFA Champions League. They've got a lot of high end stuff. They got the NHL. They've got the Supercross stuff, and they're doing a great job in picking these sports and these forms of entertainment that are really popular. They're fringe on the fringe of society per se, but they're really popular and they're doing a great job with it. So I have faith in NBCSN and continuing to make this a more common occurrence for them to showcase for sure.
10-4 on that. Um, let's start wrapping it up here.
It is 1 in the morning.
Yeah, I gotta wake up in a couple hours for my Wednesday morning shift. If you want to subscribe to us, we are available on Apple Podcasts. We're available on Google Play. We're also available on Spotify. Our main thing posts to YouTube. I know we're gonna have a format change coming up soon, where YouTube's just gonna be clips, and the full episodes are gonna be available on those streaming services. It's not gonna be this week. It probably won't be next week, and it probably won't be the week after that, just because of my work schedule. But it will be coming soon, and hopefully that'll allow you to listen to our content in a much more fan-friendly type of way. This is the For the Fans podcast, so we want to be for the fans here. Kevin, you got anything else you want to add?
No, I'm just looking forward to Eldora. And I got a day off personally, so I'm probably gonna actually get on iRacing right now and enjoy a little bit of fun. They're at Eldora for the trucks, so I might ruin my safety rating on there and have a bit of a brawl on the service. So I'm excited for this week. I love road racing. The Glen's always an incredible show. So looking forward to Saturday and Sunday.
I've never been to Watkins Glen. I've lived in New York my entire life. I'm going this weekend for the first time. I'm so excited for it. I think we're staying like 15 minutes from the track too, so it's like I'm gonna be right there the entire time. So I'm really looking forward to that. Like you said, Eldora's coming up first though. Go enjoy your race. Hopefully you don't get beat up too badly there. I'm assuming you're using your new wheel and setup and all that stuff. So
It's awesome, by the way.
yeah, unfortunately I haven't gotten to compete against you with it yet because I've been on the road doing all the stuff that I'm doing. So maybe Michigan I'll get to see firsthand how awesome it is. But anyway, this has been the For the Fans podcast, episode number 12. My name is Justin Melillo. That's Kevin McAdams. Everybody have a good week.
Bye.